Welcome to the brownstone, where silence is suspicious and dinner is never late. Tell us where you're listening from. The truth is waiting. So is Wolfe. Nero Wolfe and the Crimson Cipher contract. The rain began its whisper on the windows around 7, and by 8 it was drumming with the steady insistence of a man too proud to beg, but too desperate to leave. I was at my desk, flipping through the latest issue of Argosy, when the bell rang. Not the phone, the bell. I stood and moved to the hall, glancing toward the stained glass transom that glowed pale blue in the drizzle. I already knew it wasn't Kramer. He wouldn't ring. He'd batter the door with his knuckles and an insult. Fritz, punctual as ever, hovered at the dining room arch, hands drying on a clean towel. He caught my eye. I nodded. He disappeared, and a moment later the front door eased open, not wide, just enough to confirm she was real. She stepped inside with a tentative elegance, like a dancer used to applause but uncertain of her footing. The hat came off first, a modest beige felt, streaked wet, then the gloves, white, damp, crumpled like a confession, and last, the crimson briefcase clutched like it carried her spine. I took her coat. It dripped on the marble floor in apology. "Miss Harrow," she said. "Lydia Harrow, Archie Goodwin," I replied. "This way." She followed the scent of saffron and tobacco through the hall. When we reached the office, I paused. Wolfe was planted in his yellow chair, naturally, looking like he'd been poured into it in a former life and congealed into permanence. His lips barely moved. "You brought her," he said. "I did. Tell her I have neither time nor taste for nonsense tonight." "Of course." I turned. "Miss Harrow, I regret to inform you that Mr. Wolfe does not." "I understand," she cut in. Her voice was polished, clipped at the edges, yet soft enough to unbutton tension. "But I believe Mr. Wolfe will reconsider." Wolfe tilted his head a degree left. That was his version of cocking an eyebrow. She stepped forward. The crimson briefcase gleamed under the lamplight like a drop of arterial sin. "I represent the estate of Thomas Harrow. He served the Office of Strategic Services during the war. His personal effects have been compromised. Among them was a contract." Wolfe raised a palm. "Madam, I care nothing for patriotic drama or posthumous intrigues. The war ended. My appetite for it did likewise. A cipher contract." The silence that followed had weight. It settled across the Persian rug and between the legs of Wolfe's desk like a fog that didn't care who it killed. Wolfe's eyes narrowed, not with interest, but offense. He hated being manipulated. "Continue," he said. Lydia exhaled, and I swear I saw the color come back to her knuckles. She set the briefcase down gently, precisely, as if it were wired to explode under casual treatment. "My husband, Thomas, died a week ago. Car crash, they said. Brakes. But he was a cautious man, overcautious. I don't believe it." "Few widows do," Wolfe replied. "I'm not a widow." Even I blinked at that. Wolfe said nothing. "We were divorced, but I know him better than anyone alive. He'd been working, quietly, on something connected to a Cold War project. A list of names, military defectors, something encoded, hidden inside a contract document he kept in a red folder." Wolfe glanced at me. "She said crimson briefcase." I nodded. "Go on," he said to her. She pulled a small envelope from her coat pocket. Inside was a torn scrap of paper. I stepped forward and took it. The handwriting was jagged, slanted like it had been scrawled during turbulence. "Terminate PC contract under code 77X. Do not." The rest was missing. His initials were TH. "This isn't his." "No," Lydia said, voice lower now. "But it was in his jacket. And his files are gone. Apartment ransacked. Neatly. The kind government hands can manage." Wolfe laced his fingers together on his belly. "And you believe this contract concealed what, precisely?" "Names, orders, possibly evidence of illegal operations." "You said Cipher." "Yes." She tapped the briefcase. "He kept a key, an encoding system like the one used by OSS field agents in Prague. I know the structure, but not the language. You presume I can break it. You are Nero Wolfe." He scowled. I hid a grin. That was the one phrase that sometimes worked. "I presume you brought money," Wolfe said, voice clipped. "I brought a retainer," she replied, removing a check folded into a vellum envelope. "There will be more if you find the contract." Wolfe took the envelope, opened it slowly. His brow creased. "Half of this would suffice," he muttered. "I do not enjoy being overpaid." "You may grow to enjoy this case even less," she said. "Why?" Lydia paused. Her gaze settled on the portrait above Wolfe's desk, the orchid print, half faded but regal. Then she looked back at him. "Because I'm not the only one looking for it." Wolfe said nothing for a long moment. He stared at her like he was deciding whether she was worth the energy it would take to dismiss. Then he lifted the crimson briefcase with one hand, just barely, and placed it on the corner of his desk. "Open it," he said. She stepped forward, undid the brass clasp and gently folded it open. Inside were 3 compartments. One contained a small sheaf of faded forms, marked Employment Contract Confidential. Another held a leather-bound notebook. The third empty. There was a second document, Lydia said quietly. "I checked it before coming here." Wolfe motioned for me. I approached and picked up the contract. The paper was government issue, yellowed at the edges. A stamp in the top corner read, "OSS copy, 1944. The language was vague. Standard agreement clauses, but near the bottom, in smaller type, was a string of numbers. 77 XPCND. I glanced up at Wolfe. He nodded once. "Fetch my book," he said. I crossed to the right-hand shelf and pulled down the red ledger with the brass corners. Wolfe's personal cipher reference, used on 3 cases prior. He opened it with one hand while flipping through the note from Lydia's case with the other. "The cipher key is incomplete," he said, "but intentional. How can you tell?" I asked. He tapped a margin. "The gaps are too clean. No smudges, no watermarks. She's telling the truth. Someone took it out deliberately." Lydia sat perfectly still. The briefcase closed with a soft click. "I have reason to believe Thomas made a duplicate," she said. "Possibly kept in his apartment 77th Street. But I didn't find it." "You searched yourself?" Wolfe asked. "Yes, I used his spare key, and found nothing. Nothing except," she hesitated, "except a red wax seal, cracked, lying on the desk. The letter it sealed was missing." I saw Wolfe's eyes flick to me. "Archie." "Tomorrow morning," I said. "First train out." "You'll take a toothbrush," Wolfe said. "I'm flattered. You'll return immediately after locating the seal, the second document, or a trace of either." "Yes, sir." Lydia stood. "If you find it, I want to know first." "That depends," Wolfe said, standing slowly, "on what I find, and who it implicates." Her hand trembled slightly as she reached for the briefcase. Wolfe raised a palm. "It stays." She met his gaze. I'll give her credit. She didn't blink. Then she nodded once and left it behind. As I walked her to the door, the rain had lessened to a mist. She paused on the stoop, coat drawn tight. "If they come for me," she began. "They won't," I said. "You don't know that." "No. But I do know Wolfe. And they'll have a harder time going through him than going through you." She offered a thin smile, then turned and vanished into the street, the hem of her coat trailing behind like the last line of a poem someone didn't finish. Back inside, Fritz had lit the lamps and brought in a carafe of Burgundy. Wolfe poured himself a glass, declined mine with a grunt, and settled back into the yellow chair, like the entire affair had been staged for his irritation. He stared at the closed briefcase for a while. Then, as if remembering I existed, he spoke. "I dislike contracts," he said. "So do most people after they sign them. This one," he muttered, "might be the first I've wanted to tear open." I waited. He didn't elaborate. Instead, he tapped a finger against the armrest. "You will begin at Harrow's apartment. Examine the desk, and inquire discreetly. Someone else has already been there. Government. Possibly, possibly not." He drained half his glass in one go. "But anyone who leaves behind a cracked wax seal and takes only one document is playing by rules I intend to understand." I nodded. "And the woman?" "She's clever," Wolfe said. "Too clever. I trust her motive less than her facts. Want me to keep an eye on her?" "No. I want you to find what she missed." With that, Wolfe leaned back, closed his eyes, and went still. Not asleep, just still. The room held its breath. I picked up the notebook and studied the marks again. Thin lines, narrow symbols, letters replaced with numbers. I didn't know what it meant, yet. But I knew Wolfe, and if the cipher could be cracked, he'd crack it. If the contract hid something worth killing for, he'd find it. And if someone thought they could get in and out of this brownstone without us noticing, they hadn't yet learned who really owned the shadows in this city. The morning after Lydia Harrow's visit began with eggs, toast, and Fritz scolding me for reading the Post at the table. Wolfe, having finished his second cup of coffee, gave a curt nod toward the office, which in Wolfe speak meant, "Bring the briefcase and let's get on with it." By 10:30, the rain had quit, but the brownstone still smelled of wet wool and saffron. I carried the crimson briefcase into the office and placed it square on Wolfe's desk, careful not to jostle anything. He leaned forward, eyes narrowing at the latch. "She left this too easily," he said. She wanted you hooked. She succeeded. Wolfe unlocked the case, withdrawing the contents one by one with a surgeon's touch. He separated the envelope containing the partial cipher, the faded contract copy, and the black leather notebook.
Then, almost as an afterthought, he extracted a folded handkerchief. Monogrammed, he noted. TH. I stepped closer. Anything useful? Merely corroborative. The real meat lies here. He tapped the leather notebook. You may. Begin with the woman. Lydia? Yes. Take her out. Lunch. Martini. Whatever loosens her tongue. There is more. That's your instinct? No. That's arithmetic. The contents here, he gestured at the desk, suggests subtraction. She brought us half a story. I nodded. She said the contract went missing after he died. She said she searched the apartment and found nothing. That may be true, but I want to know how soon after his death she entered, who had access before her, and what she failed to mention. And if she doesn't know, then you will find someone. Who does? Wolfe returned to his chair and unfolded the cipher fragment again. This code is pre-1945 military cryptograph, modified. He was already speaking to the paper more than to me. That was my cue. I left the brownstone at 11 and tracked Lydia down at the Hotel Tillery off Park. The clerk didn't like my face, but my card and a $10 bill overcame his reservations. He rang her suite. She answered after 3 rings, voice steady. Miss Harrow, I said. Care to join a detective for a polite lunch? A pause. Then, 20 minutes. She descended to the lobby in a tan suit and a veil that did more to emphasize her cheekbones than conceal her expression. We walked 2 blocks to La Colina, where she ordered water and stared through the menu. I'm not hungry, she said. That's allowed, but I'd like to ask you a few things. She nodded. You said you searched his apartment? Yes. How soon after he died? The day after the crash. Alone? No. The landlord let me in. He stood by the door. I didn't touch anything. Did anyone else visit before you? I don't know. You're sure nothing was taken? She met my eyes. The red folder was gone. That much I know. You're certain it was there before? She looked down. He always kept it in the same drawer. Lower left. He never locked it. He was careful, but not paranoid. Anyone else know about it? A few friends from the service. He wasn't secretive with me, but he didn't name names. I took a slow breath. The note you brought. Where did you find it? In the inside pocket of his suit jacket, the one they gave back to me with his things. That, and a pair of cufflinks. No wallet. No. Keys. She paused. No. That was strange. I noted it. Was he carrying anything else the day he died? A folder, not the red one. A brown envelope. Thin. Contents. I never saw inside it. She touched her glass, but didn't drink. I think he was going to meet someone. He didn't say who. Do you know where he was driving? No. But I found a slip of paper on the passenger seat. A name. Colonel Wint, scribbled in pencil. I burned it. I lifted an eyebrow. Why? Because I was frightened. I didn't want questions I couldn't answer. And now you do. She looked me straight in the eye. No, but I want the truth more than I fear it. The waiter came and went. Neither of us touched the food. As we left, I offered my arm. She didn't take it. We returned to her hotel in silence. At the elevator, she turned. Did he suffer? She asked. I don't know. She nodded and went up. I made a note to find out what Colonel Wint had to say about the late Thomas Harrow, and I knew Wolfe would want the name sooner than dinner. I hailed a cab. Time to earn my lunch. By the time I made it back to the brownstone, Wolfe was already upstairs with the orchids, which meant I had precisely 43 minutes to gather data, prepare the summary, and not get shouted at for interrupting chlorophyll time. I took a fresh sheet of paper, rolled it into the Remington, and typed the facts. Lydia entered Harrow's apartment the day after the crash. She found the red folder missing. Jacket returned with cipher scrap. No keys or wallet. Slip of paper with Colonel Wint burned. Harrow had a brown envelope when last seen. I left. The summary on Wolfe's desk and headed to the kitchen. Fritz was deboning a trout with surgical grace and didn't look up. Tea? He asked. Coffee. Strong. He snorted softly. Strong enough to interrupt orchids? Strong enough to face whatever Wolfe's face is when I do. I carried the cup to the office and sat in the red chair. At exactly 4:01, Wolfe returned, sat in the yellow chair and read the page. His brow tightened at burned. Women, he muttered. Half the truth, never the facts. She said she feared whoever was after her husband might be watching her. Unconvincing. Fear motivates discretion, not arson. He tapped the edge of the notebook. Colonel Wint, find him, invite him here. He's military. They tend not to answer summons from private citizens, then answer it for me. I made a call from the hallway. Wint wasn't listed, but a friend at the Gazette gave me a number linked to a veterans club on Lexington. The man himself answered. Voice clipped. Suspicious. This is Archie Goodwin, assistant to Nero Wolfe. Pause. What's this about? A matter involving Thomas Harrow. Longer pause. He's dead. Yes, Colonel. But what he left behind isn't. A breath. Then, all right, I can come at 6. I returned to the office. Wolfe nodded once. Good. Now, about the apartment. I think we're too late. Lydia says she was let in by the landlord, but no keys or wallet were returned. If someone wanted that contract, they got there before she did. Then the question becomes, Wolfe said, did they find what they were looking for, or merely take what was visible? We sat with that. Outside, the rain had returned. At 6 precisely, the bell rang. Fritz waited at the kitchen arch. I answered it myself. Colonel Brigham Wint stood tall, pressed, and severe. He wore a charcoal suit, military lapel pin, and eyes that looked like they didn't blink often. I led him in. Wolfe rose, barely, and gestured toward the red chair. Colonel, he said, thank you for coming. I came because you mentioned Thomas Harrow. Your acquaintance? My subordinate. OSS Prague, 1944 to 46. He handled Cipher channels for northern routes. You were close. We shared operational space. That's as close as men got back then. Wolfe leaned forward. You are aware he is dead? Yes, I read the obituaries. You were mentioned in no report. Nor were you interviewed. There was nothing to say. And yet you were named on a note found in Harrow's car. Wint's jaw moved, but he said nothing. I'll make this simple, Wolfe said. We believe Harrow was carrying a sensitive contract at the time of his death. A ciphered document. It has disappeared. If he was, Wint said slowly. I was not aware of it. Wolfe watched him. What was Harrow working on? Post-war tracking, Wint said. Mapping defectors. Internal agency movements. He never stopped collecting. Why? He said history needed witnesses. Did he share what he found with you? No. Did he mention a red folder? Wint blinked. The first movement he'd made since sitting. I saw it. Once. When? 2 weeks before his death. He said it was insurance. Against what? Wint didn't answer. Wolfe nodded. That will do. Wint rose. If you find it, destroy it. That's my advice. He left without shaking hands. I turned to Wolfe. What do you think? I think he lied about something. Perhaps not all, but enough to warrant watching. He picked up the cipher again. This document, it doesn't name people. It names events, places, numbers. But those numbers, cross-referenced, could point to people. Yes, I stood. So now what? Tomorrow, he said, you will go to Harrow's apartment, speak with the building superintendent, learn who had keys, look for any tenant who noticed visitors, and take gloves. If the red wax seal she mentioned is still there, I want it. You think they missed something? No. I think they removed the obvious and left the dangerous. That is always the greater error. He sat back. The briefcase was still open, waiting, and in it, Wolfe believed, was a thread someone had already killed to cut. The taxi dropped me at the corner of 74th and Lexington. Midtown was grey with morning fog, the kind that dulled colour and kept secrets. Harrow's building stood like a brick apostrophe in a sentence no one remembered how to finish. I stepped inside. The lobby was all marble and polish, too clean for a place with recent death. A tall ficus sulked near the elevator. Behind the desk sat a man in a brown uniform, silver trim on his cap, and a face like wet granite. Morning, I said. You, the superintendent? Doorman. Superintendent's out back, fixing a pipe. Name's Goodwin. I'm assisting Mr. Wolfe. We're working with the late Mr. Harrow's estate. He eyed me, then reached for a logbook. No visitors listed since the 14th, he said. Except one. Army man. Night before the accident. Army. Uniform. Black overcoat. Tall. Didn't give a name. Had a key. Did Harrow often have military guests? Never seen one before. You sure it was a real uniform? Buddy, he said flatly. I wore one for 6 years. I can spot the real kind. He lifted the logbook. The entry was blank where a name should have been. But the timestamp read 11:46 p.m. Did he sign out? Nope. Must have left through the back. Fire door's got a rickety latch. I gave him a $2 bill and my card. If you think of anything else, call me. Day or night. He pocketed the bill and went back to staring at the lobby like it owed him money. Apartment 4C was at the end of the south corridor. The lock clicked easily. Lydia's key had survived her nerves. I stepped inside. The air was stale, not musty. The curtains were drawn halfway. A hat sat on the rack, brim tilted. Harrow's taste ran toward modest bachelor with money. Walnut desk, pressed, suits on hooks, navy blue rug with wine trim. I took a slow lap of the place. Nothing looked rifled. No drawers open, no overturned cushions. But the quiet was too clean, like someone had scrubbed after a storm. I circled back to the desk. The lower left drawer, the one Lydia mentioned, was empty, except for a stray paperclip and the indent of what had once been a folder. On top of the desk lay a cracked circular object, dull red, about the size of $50. I leaned closer. It was wax, a broken seal. Still embedded in its center was a faint impression, a phoenix over crossed swords. I took out my handkerchief and wrapped it carefully. Wolfe would want it intact. I opened the rest of the drawers. The top one held stationery, a fountain pen, and 3 cancelled checks. One was made out to a B. Wint. I pocketed it. The bookshelf had a row of military texts, a brass paperweight, and a miniature globe with Czechoslovakia still marked in full. I stepped into the bedroom. Clean. Bed made. No laundry. A framed photo on the dresser showed Harrow, in uniform, arm around a taller man, face hidden by glare. The bathroom was sterile, toothbrush dry, razor clean. I turned off the lights and stood by the window. Across the alley, someone's radio was playing Glenn Miller. I stayed until the song ended. Then I called the brownstone. Wolfe answered after the 3rd ring. Yes, it's clean, too clean. But I found the wax seal. Describe it. Red. Phoenix over crossed swords. He exhaled through his nose. OSS Prague Division. That tracks. I also found a check stub, made out to Wint. Amount? 200 even. Curious. For services? Possibly. Or silence. Wolfe paused. You will return now. I'm heading out. Anything else? Yes. Avoid Kramer. If he learns of this before I am ready, he will grow tedious. I live to serve. I hung up, folded the wax carefully into a tin cigarette case, and double-locked the apartment. As I passed the doorman again, he lifted a brow. Find what you needed? Not yet, I said. But we're getting warmer. Funny thing, he added. That soldier, he was whistling. Whistling. Some tune. I didn't catch it. Was it fast? Slow? Slow. Marching rhythm, but soft. I nodded. That helps. Outside, the fog had thickened. Manhattan was a grey hush of secrets waiting for someone to put them in order. And Wolfe, if nothing else, believed in order. Back at the brownstone, Fritz was mincing herbs in silence. The smell of shallots and beef stock filled the kitchen. But I went straight to the office. Wolfe was already seated. Yellow chair, hands steepled, eyes closed, as though summoning answers from air. I placed the sealed tin on the desk. He opened it without a word. Still intact, I said. He lifted the broken wax with tweezers, holding it to the desk lamp. Phoenix. Crossed swords. Yes. Prague Division? Yes. That symbol was decommissioned in 45. Officially. He rotated it slowly. The seal was broken deliberately, not torn. Someone opened the letter it sealed, read it, left no trace of the contents. Wolfe nodded once, and they were careful. The apartment looked clean, nothing disturbed, no marks. But there was an emptiness to it, like it had been polished after being stripped. An artful vacuum, Wolfe murmured. I did find one thing. I handed over the check stub. To Wint, 200, dated 10 days before Harrow. Died. Wolfe held it between 2 fingers. For silence, perhaps. Or information. He set it beside the wax. And the doorman, I added, remembers the man in uniform. Came late. Used a key. Left through the back. Description? Tall. Overcoat. Army dress. Wolfe drummed his fingers once. And he was whistling. That made Wolfe's eyebrows lift. Whistling? A slow tune. March-like. The doorman couldn't place it. Wolfe reached behind him and removed a small, leather-bound volume from the bookshelf. Military Marches of the Western Front. He flipped pages slowly. If the tune was specific enough to remember, we may identify it. That can come later. He leaned back. This was not a robbery. No, nor a burglary. Too clean. Then it was an erasure. I nodded. They took something they didn't want found, and they left nothing that could show what had been there, except the seal. which may have been deliberate. Why? To suggest a warning. A marker left for anyone curious. Like Lydia. Precisely. He stood. A rare gesture. Walked to the window. Looked out at the street. There is an elegance to this, he said. An unpleasant elegance. He turned back. Beginner. Full inquiry into Harrow's military connections. Focus on the Prague division. Names, ranks, retirements. Find out who was involved in that office. I'll call Saul and Lon. Use Fred for surveillance. I want eyes on Colonel Wint. He is hiding something. Should we speak to Kramer yet? No. He'll interfere. Wolfe moved to the sideboard and poured himself a half glass of sherry. He sipped, then stared at the wax again. Phoenix. Over swords, he said softly. Rising from fire, bearing steel. A resurrection mark. It wasn't just a seal. I waited. It was a message. He looked up. You said the folder left a mark in the drawer. Yes. Measure it. Have a replica made. Paper, folder, thickness. I want to see what it might have held. Weight and size may tell me what was removed. You think the shape matters? In a code world, Wolfe said, everything is shape. I nodded. He walked back to his chair and sat heavily. This is not a murder case. Not yet. No body. But there is death and silence. And silence, Wolfe said, is often where guilt resides. I stood. What do you want? First? The names. Wint's contacts? Everyone who ever shared a room with Thomas Harrow. Will do. And Archie, Wolfe added as I reached the door. Yes? Be discreet. I smiled. Always. He sighed. No, not always. But this time, try. The brownstone was dim when I returned. Fritz had extinguished the front hall lamp to conserve the globe, and the air carried the calm, simmering quiet that always came after Wolfe's orchid. Hour. In the office, Wolfe was seated, arms folded, the crimson wax seal under magnification on the desk before him. I shut the door gently and crossed the room. Well? He asked. No further disturbance. The super didn't speak to the press. The doorman saw no one yesterday but a grocery boy, Wolfe grunted. He leaned forward and gestured to the seal, still cupped in a shallow glass dish. Look closely, he said. I bent over it. The faint outline had deepened under the light. An eagle. No, not quite. It's not the phoenix. No, Wolfe murmured. It's older. I tilted my head. What's the mark? United States War Department. Signal Intelligence Service. Circa 1943. A field variant. Used briefly for encoding internal movements and post-liberation. Alignments in the Prague sector. So Harrow used it? Or someone wanted us to think he did? He tapped the rim of the dish. The seal was applied cleanly, then cracked without heat. It was opened, examined, and set aside. That implies confidence, intimacy. A man doesn't break this seal unless he knows the code. There was a knock, not the bell. Fritz's knuckle against the oak. Wolfe didn't speak. I opened the door. Lydia stepped in, dry and composed. Her hat was dark felt, no veil this time. Thank you for seeing me, Wolfe gestured to the red chair. She sat without hesitation. I didn't want to say it before, she began, because I wasn't certain. But I believe Thomas created something more than just a cipher. Wolfe gave a small incline of the head. A sheet, half numerical, half symbolic. He called it the contract. Why that term? Because it wasn't a list. It wasn't language. It was structure, conditionals, markers, locations. It was an agreement disguised as data. Between parties unnamed, the implication was if certain things occurred, others would follow. A trigger? I asked. Yes. Wolfe interlaced his fingers. And did you see it? Once. He showed me a page. A column of dates. Another of 3-letter designations. I asked what they meant. He said they were not names, but consequences. She paused. Her eyes moved to the wax. That seal, she said quietly, was on the original envelope. Wolfe blinked once. You are sure? Yes. He used it on only 2 things. Letters. From Prague. And that contract. I stepped closer. Did he ever speak of destroying it? Once. But he never would. He said it was his lodestone. He used that word. Wolfe's brow rose. A moral compass. No. A guarantee. He said it was the one thing that kept him alive. Wolfe leaned back, his lips compressed into thought. You didn't come to protect him, he said. You came to recover it. She said nothing. Wolfe continued. And now that it's missing, you believe someone has the power he once held. Her fingers gripped the armrest. Yes. Wolfe turned to me. Archie, retrieve the cipher book. Volume 3. I crossed to the shelf, selected the thick red ledger. and brought it to him. He flipped through pages marked with Wolfe's own notations, columned, codes, vintage ciphers, even shorthand in Czech. He stopped at a folded sheet. "Here," he said. He passed it to Lydia. She studied it. Eyes widened. "That symbol," she whispered. "Speak it aloud," Wolfe said. She hesitated. Then, X77, PC. Terminate on signature. Wolfe closed his eyes. "Yes," he said softly. So it was a kill switch. The room was still, the sort of stillness that doesn't belong in a Manhattan brownstone. Too weighted, too deliberate. Wolfe set the cipher book aside and folded his arms. "Miss Harrow, did your husband mention who created the document?" "No names," she said. "Only that it was compiled, pieced together. A joint effort. He called it a post-war ledger with pre-war debts." Wolfe grunted. "Poetic and misleading." He shifted in his chair. "Describe its format." He showed me one sheet, she said. It had columns, code terms on the left, then numbers, then a symbol, a triangle, a square, a circle, sometimes a double mark. It didn't look like language, but it wasn't gibberish. It was clean. "Mathematical?" I asked. "Yes, like formulas, but never explained." Wolfe reached for the envelope that had once held the cipher scrap. He tapped the upper right corner. "Here, 77XPC. Lydia nodded. That was one of them. "Meaning what?" Wolfe asked. She hesitated. "He never said, but when I asked if it was a name, he said no, not a person, an action, a command string." "Yes," Wolfe nodded. "Just once. Then it was a contract in structure only, a ledger of executable clauses, Cold War assassination protocol, masked in military archiving." She paled. "You believe it was a kill list?" "I believe it was the list." The rain had returned, tapping the windows in a slow, disinterested rhythm. Wolfe turned to me. "Saul will need to locate surviving OSS personnel from the Prague unit, narrow to cryptographic operators and archivists, then cross-reference with any field agents who retired before 1947. I nodded. "Fred? Wint. Tail him, discreetly. If he meets anyone twice, we want names." Wolfe turned back to Lydia. "You have not been honest." Her mouth opened, but no words came. "I won't ask why," Wolfe said. "But I must ask what else he kept." She looked at the seal again, then back to Wolfe. There was a second sheet, handwritten. I never saw it, only the envelope. It was sealed when I found it in his drawer last spring. "Did you open it?" "No," I asked him. He said it wasn't for me. "And yet you remember it, because he told me if anything happened to him, I should destroy it." Wolfe tilted his head. "And you didn't." "I couldn't." Wolfe pressed his fingertips together. "Then it may still be out there." I cleared my throat. The apartment was clean, too clean, but that seal was left behind. Wolfe, what if it was bait? Wolfe considered. A trace, a trail. He looked again at the broken wax. Or a warning. To her. Lydia swallowed hard. "I thought it was just a seal." "Nothing is just anything in espionage," Wolfe muttered. He stood. His bulk shifted the light against the bookcase. "This case," he said, "no longer concerns theft. It concerns continuity." He looked down at the seal one last time. Someone means to carry on the contract, and none of us, Lydia included, doubted what that meant. The rain had stopped, but the clouds hadn't moved. Manhattan sat under a low, sullen lid, thick as cigar smoke and twice as hostile. Wolfe and I were in the office, the broken wax seal, between us like a relic at a shrine. He hadn't spoken in 6 minutes, which for him was either deep thought or mild indigestion. Then came the sound. 3 heavy knocks. Not the bell. Kramer never used the bell. I opened the door before Fritz could appear with a frown. Inspector Kramer stood there in his trench coat, damp and aggressive. His cigar was unlit, but clenched like it wanted to bite something. "Where is he?" I stepped aside. "Same place he's always been, Inspector." Kramer stomped in like the Constitution was folded in his breast pocket. He smelled of damp wool. "And cheap tobacco." Wolfe didn't rise. He didn't even flinch. "Ah, de semanos sine causa clamavi," he said dryly. Kramer growled. "I told you to cut the Latin, Wolfe. You're not impressing anybody, nor attempting to." Wolfe gestured toward the red chair. "You look troubled." "I am troubled. I've got agents calling my desk, Wolfe. Not New York agents. Federal. Asking if you're nosing into coded documents, Cold War garbage, and, this is the phrase they used, ghost codes." Wolfe arched one brow. "Charming. Poetic. Kramer didn't sit. He hovered like a verdict. I'm telling you this once. Whatever this is, stay out of it. You interfere with a federal probe, and I'll see to it you're gagged by morning. Wolfe folded his hands. I haven't interfered. I've inquired. Surely the law makes space for curiosity. You're not curious. You're dangerous. I take that as unintended flattery. Kramer dropped a file folder on the desk. It slapped the wood like a challenge. This came across my desk this morning. Bronx Precinct. Ex-intelligence translator. Name of Russell Poe. Found dead in his flat. Natural gas leak. Wolfe said nothing. Kramer jabbed a finger at the folder. Only the meter was smashed. Deliberately. Glass shards under the oven. His fingernails were broken. He didn't go out easy. Was he linked to Prague? Wolfe asked. Kramer blinked. I didn't say that. No. But your presence did. Kramer took a long breath through his nose. I'm not here to hand you evidence, Wolfe. I'm here to tell you to stop. You're playing around something hot. People are dead. I am aware. Kramer leaned over the desk. Don't obstruct. Me. I mean it. I have obstructed no one, Wolfe replied. I have spoken to no agencies, nor interfered with your own investigation. I have examined facts that were brought to me, as is my legal right. Kramer stood straight. You say that now, but I know your methods. One more corpse tied to this lunacy, and I'll have you boxed in. Wolfe sniffed. Fiat voluntas tua. Kramer narrowed his eyes. That better not mean what I think it means. It does. I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from smiling. Kramer turned to leave. At the door, he paused. By the way, the translator who died? He'd been flagged once, back in 47, for keeping a duplicate record of Cipher dispatches. They thought it was harmless. Guess they were wrong. Wolfe's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing. Kramer didn't wait for a response. He walked out, trench coat flapping behind him like a warning. The door clicked shut behind him with finality. Wolfe didn't move for several seconds. His gaze lingered on the file Kramer had dropped like it might start smoking. I crossed the room and picked it up. Inside were 3 crime scene photos, grainy black and white prints. First showed a body slumped beside an open oven. Second, the busted gas meter, jagged edges catching the flash. Third, a close-up of the hands, fingernails split, knuckles scraped. Russell Poe, I said aloud. Translator, Prague rotation? Wolfe reached for the index cards he kept near his blotter. I knew what he was after. Names from the earlier Prague cipher list we'd been assembling. He found it fast. Poe, R. Assigned to secondary cipher. Monitoring. Brief stint. 3 months. Left in 1946. I nodded. Low level, but access to transmission logs. Yes. And that made him dangerous. Wolfe leaned back. He kept duplicates, which suggests either fear or leverage, or a conscience. Wolfe pursed his lips. An odd time for conscience, but yes. Possible. I set the file down. Think Kramer was bluffing. Coming here like that? No, Wolfe said. He was angry, and that makes him honest. But someone above him is hiding things. He mentioned federal agents. Plural, Wolfe grunted. Meaning this is larger than one document, or one death. I glanced at the wax seal again. There, covering a pattern. Poe was the second. Wolfe nodded slowly. Then we must move before there's a third. I tilted my head. Should I warn Lydia? No. Why not? Because we do not know what she is. That gave me pause. You still think she's hiding something? I know she is, Wolfe said. I do not know what. He tapped the arms of his chair twice. Bring Fred in tonight. Wint is key. If he meets with anyone linked to Poe, we act. Got it. And Saul, have him continue cross-referencing Prague names with New York deaths in the last 2 years. Use the morgue listings, obituaries, quiet deaths. No fanfare. I stood. Wolfe glanced back at the file. Ghost codes, he murmured. How charming. You believe they exist. Oh, Archie, Wolfe said, voice low. They never stopped. I spotted her outside the Mayflower Club at 12:13 sharp, stepping from a cab in a dark green coat with a lapel that meant business. Lydia didn't glance back as she walked inside. She didn't need to. The game had changed. I waited. 30 seconds, gave her a polite lead, then followed through the revolving door. The Mayflower was quiet, discreet, and expensive. The kind of place where old money came to argue about new wars. The maitre d' looked at me as though I'd left. My gloves on the sidewalk. I'm meeting someone, I said. Last name Harrow. His eyes swept me, weighing jacket against tie. I believe she's already joined her guest. Would you like to wait? No, I'll find her. He didn't stop me, but he didn't like it either. I moved past velvet, chairs and discreet silver cutlery. Near the back, at a window table, she sat opposite a man in a grey suit, so well pressed it could have stood on its own. Colonel Wint. He was taller than I'd expected, hair parted with a ruler, eyes sharp, back straight. Every movement was a decision. I slipped into the booth behind theirs, a polite distance away, and lifted a copy of the Times. The paper rustled. My ears opened. Their voices were low, meant for no one but themselves. But the colonel wasn't the whispering type. "I told you not to come here," Wint said. "I had no choice," Lydia replied. "Wolfe is involved." Wint exhaled through his nose. "You brought Wolfe into this? Are you insane? I needed someone who could read between the lines. That's exactly what I'm afraid of." Their cutlery clinked once. Lydia leaned in. "They know about Prague. They know nothing." "Not really. He has the seal." A pause. "That's not possible," Wint said. "I left it behind. He found it." Silence. Then the colonel's voice again. "You told me it was gone." "I thought it was." The colonel shifted. I could hear the leather creak under his weight. "You're playing with something you don't understand." "I understand enough," she said. "Thomas didn't die because of a gas leak. He was eliminated." "Prove it." "I don't need to. They're doing it for me." He lowered his voice further. I strained. "There is no contract. You—" "No, that's not true. Even if it existed," he said, "it would have been invalidated." "You're lying." A long pause. Then Lydia's voice again, steady now. "What about the red note?" My spine straightened. Wint didn't answer. "Right away. I told you never to mention that again. I think it's time someone did. You're going to get us both killed. I'd rather be dead than watched forever." Wint exhaled slowly. The red note was a failsafe, nothing more. It wasn't a note. Her voice was a whisper. Now, it was a trigger. He said nothing. "I want to know if it's still in play." "You don't," Wint replied. Then he stood. The chair slid back without sound, as though even the furniture feared him. "You're making this worse," he said, and with that, he left. Lydia remained seated, hands in her lap. Her face didn't move. I folded the paper, left $2 on the table, and walked out. Outside, the light had gone flat. A cab rolled past, splashing through a shallow gutter. I stepped to the corner and waited. 10 minutes later, Lydia exited alone, chin tucked, gloves on. I followed half a block behind. She walked south, heels precise, posture unshaken. At Lexington, she turned right, stopped, and looked into a florist window. I paused across the street. She didn't look back, but she knew I was there. Another 5 minutes passed before she entered a drugstore. I used the moment to phone the brownstone from a booth beside a cigar shop. Wolfe answered. "Yes." I tailed her to the Mayflower. She had lunch with Wint. Quiet booth, private tone. And she mentioned something called the red note. There was silence on the line. Then, "Repeat that." She asked him if the red note was still in play. Wint told her to drop it. Sounded like a trigger code. Wolfe muttered something under his breath. Latin, most likely. "I want you back here. Now. Copy that. And, Archie, bring no one with you, including sentiment." Click. By the time I turned, Lydia was back on the street. She didn't glance my way. I let her go. Back at the brownstone, Fritz was finishing the midday soup. I stepped into the office and found Wolfe already standing, fingers steepled against his lips. "Red note," he said. An internal term used by the Prague Post in 1944, rare, only invoked twice. What did it mean? It meant nullify upon breach. I frowned. Breach of what? Trust, protocol, reality. It was a way of saying, if this is compromised, end the line. A death order. Yes. I pulled off my coat. Wint didn't want to talk about it. He wouldn't. Only the highest clearance levels ever saw it in writing. So how does Lydia know? Wolfe lowered into the yellow chair. Because she was married to the man who kept it. And now, she's asking questions. She won't last long if she keeps doing that. I nodded slowly. Wolfe closed his eyes, thinking, then opened them. Contact Saul. We need the original Prague registry. Names, ranks, cipher holders, red note carriers, everything. On it, he reached for the wax seal, still resting in. It's dish. This wasn't left behind by mistake, he said. No, it was a whisper. A warning? Worse. He looked at me squarely. It was permission. It took 2 phone calls and 1 visit to a midtown barbershop to learn the one. Janitor's name was Dorsey. He worked odd hours, smoked a brand called Avalon, and had a fondness for rye that beat out caution. I waited at the service entrance until he stepped out for air. Dorsey, he turned, squinted. Mid-60s, frayed collar, coat too thin for the weather. I don't give out keys. Didn't ask for keys, I said. Just a minute of your time, maybe two. He eyed me. Depends what they're worth. I handed him a folded 10. Dorsey looked at it like it might vanish, then tucked it into his coat. Make it quick. I nodded toward the building. I need access to 4C, Harrow's place. He scratched. His temple. That's Spook. You knew him. Knew he tipped well and kept quiet. Never smiled. Anyone been in since he died? He shrugged. You. And the lady. No one else? He paused. One guy, maybe 3 days ago, said he was from the city building codes, asked about ventilation. But he didn't check anything. Describe him. Overcoat, narrow face, quiet shoes. That was all I needed. He let me in through the basement stairwell. I climbed to 4, used the spare Lydia had left with Wolfe, and let myself in. The air still held a faint trace of scorched paper and cold ash. I made for the fireplace. It wasn't large, decorative mostly, but behind the grate was the sort of dark nobody dusted. I got down on one knee and eased the grate forward. The first thing I saw was soot. The second was a shard of charred envelope. Carefully, I reached in. A brittle corner crumbled at the touch. Then, I saw it. A fragment, maybe 2 inches wide, 5 across, edges scorched black, but at its center, untouched by fire, was a line of cipher. I slipped it into an envelope, stood, and took a long look around the apartment. The books were undisturbed. The chair by the window hadn't been moved, but someone had tried to burn something, and had failed. I left by the service stairwell. Back at the brownstone, Fritz handed me a linen napkin and a frown. You're covered in soot. Better than blood. He didn't respond. Wolfe was at his desk reading The Journal of Applied Botany. He set it aside the moment I entered. Well? I placed the envelope on his blotter. He opened it, removed the fragment, and turned on the lamp. The cipher was simple in shape. Columns, rows, letters interspersed with numbers. But there, halfway down, was the phrase 7 X PC RNT Wolfe. Exhaled slowly. Red note trigger. That's what it means? Yes. He reached for the magnifier. This is Prague encoded, 1943 series. Only used in termination protocols. This was the activation clause. Left in a chimney, I said. Half burned. He nodded. They tried to destroy it. Something stopped them, or they were interrupted. I leaned back in the red chair. What does it mean, Wolfe, in plain English? He set the lens down. It means someone restarted an old engine, and they left behind the match that lit it. Wolfe remained still for a moment, eyes fixed on the scorched fragment. Then he pressed a finger to the edge, careful not to disturb the ash-laced fibers. This, he said softly, is not just a cipher. It's a command. A command to kill? I asked. More precisely, a pre-authorized execution order contingent upon breach. He turned the paper slightly. 77 XPC is the reference. RNT denotes the trigger, red note termination. This fragment is both evidence and instrument. I stood. So this note could have been shown, used, to justify a hit. Wolfe looked at me. No, this note didn't justify it. It activated it. That landed in the room like a lead weight. He tapped twice on the edge of his desk, then reached for the cipher ledger. We have 3 terms confirmed now. 77 XPC, RNT and the seal. He opened the book, turned several pages, and pointed to a line. Here, Field Dispatch, April 1944. Secondary cipher, RNT active if breach and duplicate recorded. Duplicate, I echoed. Yes, if a secondary record was kept without. Authorization, I stepped closer. Like Poe's file? Exactly. Wolfe stared at the fragment again. Harrow knew what he held. And Poe may have kept a mirror of the original. Perhaps he believed it would protect him. Didn't work. No. The air in the room turned thick. I could feel it settle around us. I asked, do we tell Kramer? No. Wolfe's voice was flat. He would storm, blunder, accuse, and someone else would die before dinner. He set the cipher fragment into a clean envelope, marked it in black ink, and locked it in the center drawer. Then what? We find who activated this. Wint. He's an executor, not an author. He obeys policy. So who sets policy? Wolfe looked away. out the window, where the clouds had begun to move. That, he said, is the true question. I turned toward the door. I'll check back with Fred. Wint may be meeting someone tonight. Good. And Saul's working through the Prague clearance records. Wolfe nodded. I paused. You think there's more than one of these notes still out there? He closed his eyes. I think Harrow wasn't the last man marked. And this, he gestured toward the chimney-blackened scrap, was only the first. Ember. The bell rang at 4:17 p.m., 3 minutes into Wolfe's designated reading window. He did not look up from the botanical journal. Fritz appeared at the archway with the dignity of a Swiss diplomat and said, "A Miss Tilda Vance." Wolfe made no reply. "She insists the matter is urgent," Fritz added. I looked at Wolfe. He exhaled. "Show her in." Fritz vanished, and a moment later, the woman stepped into the office like someone who hadn't walked into a room unannounced. In years, she was mid-30s, crisp navy suit, shoes too sensible to be stylish, hair pulled taut as a typewriter ribbon. Her eyes were alert, anxious, not timid. "Miss Vance," I said, rising. "Archie Goodwin. Mr. Wolfe." She nodded. At me, then at Wolfe, with the careful politeness of someone unsure whether to curtsy or run. "I only have a few minutes," she said, sitting before being asked. "But I thought, well, I know Thomas Harrow worked with you. Or rather, his widow did." Wolfe's gaze moved, but just barely. She came to me. "You are his former secretary?" "Yes. I was with him for 6 years, from 42 to 48, off and on since then. He trusted me." Wolfe made a low noise in his throat, somewhere between agreement and indigestion. Miss Vance placed her handbag on her lap, folding her hands atop it. "I'm here because something's been bothering me. Something I did." "That's refreshingly direct," Wolfe said. "Please continue." She looked down at her gloved hands. 2 months ago, Thomas called me to his apartment. It was late. He had a letter on the desk, typed, unsigned, but clearly meant to be his. It was addressed to someone named, she hesitated, Brigham Wint. Wolfe's eyebrows moved the smallest fraction. Harrow dictated a revision. He asked me to change 2 lines. I didn't question it, but the tone was different, softer than he usually wrote, almost apologetic. "And you typed the changes?" "Yes." He watched me. Then he signed it, folded it, sealed it. "With wax?" "No. Envelope glue. I left before he mailed it." "Did he mention the content?" She shook her head. "No. But the original, before I made the edits, contained a phrase. I remember it because it was strange. He wrote, 'I know the red briefcase is not safe here.'" I exchanged a glance with Wolfe. "You're sure of the wording?" "Yes." "You didn't copy it?" "No. I only saw it briefly, but I remember that line." "Then tell me." Wolfe said, "Why you're here now?" She hesitated. "Because someone asked me about the letter yesterday. A man. I don't know his name. He stopped me outside my building. Said he worked with Thomas in Prague. Asked if I'd handled any correspondence in the last 6 months. Did he describe the letter?" "No, but he asked if it contained a list." Wolfe frowned. "And what did you say?" I said I didn't know, which is true, but he wouldn't. Let it go. He asked about briefcases, red ones. I leaned forward. "And then?" "He told me that if I remembered anything at all, I should tell someone before I forgot it." Wolfe exhaled through his nose. "Rather theatrical," he said. "Yes. That's why I came here." Wolfe nodded once. "You were wise." "To do so." Miss Vance stood abruptly. "I can't stay. I'm being watched." "By whom?" "I don't know, but it feels like everyone." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "One last question," he said. "When Harrow mentioned the red briefcase, did he ever say which one?" She froze. "I assumed it was the one he kept in his closet." "You assumed," Wolfe said. "But did he ever refer to a second?" She hesitated. Once. Yes." He said, "If anything happens, it's not in the first case. That's all." Wolfe didn't blink. "Thank you, Miss Vance. That's all I require. For now." She gave a small nod, turned, and left the office. I waited until I heard the front door close. Then Wolfe spoke. "She lied. She lied," Wolfe repeated. More to the air than to me. I leaned back in my chair, watching him. "About what exactly?" Wolfe tapped the armrest. "Not everything. The fear was genuine, but the timeline was off, and the tone, fabricated." "You mean the letter wasn't from 2 months ago?" "No. It was likely written within days of Harrow's death, perhaps even the night before." "Why fudge the date?" "Because she was part of it. Not the killing, but the movement, the handling." I stood, paced once, then back. The letter, if it really mentioned the red briefcase and a list, could have been the trigger, or the delivery slip, Wolfe muttered. The man who approached her was verifying completion, which means she wasn't a loose end. She was a checkpoint. Precisely. I turned toward the door. Want me to trail her? No, Wolfe said. She'll vanish now. She was instructed to speak. The message has been relayed. She'll be picked up, or silenced. You think she knows that? I believe she suspects it. And yet, she came. I whistled softly. She mentioned 2 briefcases, I said. We've only seen one. Yes, and it was Lydia's. The other remains at large. He paused, then added, or not. You think Vance has it? No, but she may have passed it along. To whom? Wolfe's eyes found mine. To the man without a name. I sat down. Then we have a problem. We have several. He reached for the sealed envelope containing the scorched cipher fragment, held it aloft, then tapped it once. This was the order. What Vance described was the relay, meaning someone else has the payload. And Wint, still playing dumb. But if he has the second case, he won't open it until he's told. Or until someone fails to stop him. The phone rang. Wolfe flicked his fingers. I answered. Brownstone. Archie speaking. This is Saul. Talk. I finished scanning the Prague contact rolls. One match to Harrow's late cipher. Habits. The name Richard Malkin. Used to be quartermaster. Left in 46. Died last year. How? Heart failure. But here's the rub. His personal effects were seized by a private firm before the coroner arrived. Which firm? Can't. Trace it. Shell name. No phone listing. Wolfe gestured for the receiver. I passed it over. Saul, Wolfe said. Find out who requested the seizure. I want a name. I want a room number. And I want it tonight. He hung up without waiting. I folded my arms. You expecting a second visitor? No, Wolfe said. I'm expecting a fire. I blinked. A fire? Yes. These men do not leave behind loose documents. They cleanse. Vance spoke because she believes she's already in the blast radius. You think someone's going to torch the evidence? Not just torch it, erase it. Harrow's contract was only useful if it remained hidden. Now it's exposed, compromised. So they'll burn everything. I stood. I'll head to the Harrow apartment again. Maybe that second briefcase didn't leave after all. Take gloves, and don't use the elevator. He turned back to his desk but then paused. Archie, yes? If you find it, and it's locked, don't open it. Why not? Wolfe looked at me. Because I don't know what's inside, and neither do they, which makes it dangerous twice over. I nodded. Wolfe reached for the magnifier again. Outside, the light had gone gold with evening. Inside, it had already turned to shadow. And somewhere between those two, a second case waited to be claimed. The rain had let up by mid-morning, but the city was still slick with it. Windows streaked, sidewalks glistening like old silver. I took a cab to the baggage depot on East 42nd, a block from Grand Central. The building was squat and grim, flanked by a bakery and a shoeshine parlor, and smelled like wet cardboard and varnish. Inside, a sleepy clerk with a comb-over and nicotine. Teeth looked up from behind a counter. Morning, I said, flashing a smile and my card. Archie Goodwin, licensed operative. I'm tracking down a claim made 2 days ago. Luggage checked by a Thomas Harrow, claimed by someone else. He gave me a squint like I'd insulted his sister, but took the card anyway. Everything gets signed for, he said. Perfect. I'm looking for briefcase number 1084C, red leather. Checked on the 10th. Claimed when? He pulled a large binder from beneath the desk and thumbed through the carbon pages. Claimed on the 15th, noontime. Who signed for it? He turned the register around. The signature was loopy and feminine. I leaned in. Lydia Harrow. The handwriting was neat. Too neat. Too practiced. I pulled the letter she'd written Wolfe from my inside pocket and compared. The H. In her real hand, it curled back on itself. Here, it looped like it had something to hide. You remember the woman who picked it up? He frowned. Sort of. Brown hair, dark coat, gloves. Didn't say much. Car was waiting outside. Alone? She walked in alone. Left the same. I slipped him a 5. Think you could remember a plate number? No, but the car was black. Hudson. Maybe a Commodore. That didn't help much. I jotted it down anyway. Anyone else come asking about it? He looked over his glasses. 2 guys. Military type. One showed a badge. Told me not to say a word to anyone. Said the case was under federal hold. This was before it was claimed. Did you give it to them? No. Why not? They didn't have a matching stub. I offered another 5. That was the right decision. Back in the cab, I stared at the fake signature. The woman who retrieved the case had used Lydia's name, but it hadn't been Lydia, which meant someone was pretending to be the widow. And whoever she was, she had the second briefcase. I returned to the brownstone. By noon. Wolfe was in the office, examining a postage stamp through a magnifier. He didn't look up as I entered. "Well?" he asked. "It's gone. The second case." "Yes. Claimed 2 days ago by someone signing as Lydia." Described the signature. "Flawless forgery. Too clean. Round where it should have. Hooked." Wolfe lowered the glass. Described the woman. "Gloves. Brown hair. Came and went fast. Clark said car waited outside. Black Hudson. He thinks a Commodore. That model is popular with government contracts." I nodded. "And here's the wrinkle. 2 men, military, asked about the case before it was picked up. Claimed federal interest, but they didn't have a stub, so the clerk didn't release it." Wolfe allowed himself a sound that might have passed for approval. "They were intercepting it. Someone else got there first." He reached for his blotter and drew a single word. "Inside." I sat. "You think the imposter was already working for them?" "No. I think she was them. Or close enough. The pickup was clean. No fuss. No noise. That means sanctioned." He folded the paper, tapped it once, then set it aside. "Which means Lydia Harrow has been lying. She said she never got the second case. And perhaps she didn't. But she certainly knew it would be moved." I looked at the fire, then back at him. "She's been playing both sides." "Yes, but poorly." He rang for Fritz. "Lunch," he said. "In 40 minutes. We'll need our strength." Then he turned to me. "Tonight, Archie, we find out who forged that signature and who ordered her to use it." That evening, after a brisk stop at a document examiner's office on West 39th and a double check with the depot's logbook copy, courtesy of a cooperative night clerk, I returned to the brownstone with answers. Wolfe didn't need to ask for. "She's an actress," I said, hanging my coat. "The woman who signed as Lydia. Her name's Ruth Conrad. Did 2 years on the stage before signing on with a contract agency that handles, let's say, non-theatrical engagements." Wolfe was in his chair, the scarlet napkin from dinner folded across one arm. "Military?" he asked. "Not officially, but she's been seen leaving the west entrance of the War Department twice in the last month." Saul confirmed it. Wolfe closed his eyes. "They used her as a ghost, a stand-in." I nodded. "She was paid in cash. No address, no contact since." Wolfe opened his eyes again. "That tells us 2 things. Only 2. 1, they needed the second case without alerting the real Lydia. 2, they didn't trust her enough to do it herself, so she was on a leash," I said. "And now they've cut it." Wolfe laced his fingers. "She may have had good reason to hide it, or she may never have seen it, but she certainly knew it existed. That detail about not the first case, you don't say that unless you know the second is real." I paced to the globe, cracked it open, and poured a small scotch. "So, now what? We find out what was in that case. And how do we do that?" Wolfe looked at me like I'd just suggested dancing for a clue, not by opening it. "That opportunity has passed. Then what? We watch for the reaction. Documents don't move in a vacuum. If someone has read what was inside, they will act, and someone will respond. That's where the leak will surface." I nodded. "You want me to push her?" "Yes. Call her. Ask for a meeting. Use Kramer's name. Tell her you know the case was claimed and that the signature didn't match. Watch what she does. And if she bolts, follow her. Discreetly. If she's still playing this hand, she'll lead us to the next player." I was halfway to the hall when Wolfe spoke again. "Archie," I stopped. "If she begs, stall her. If she lies, smile. But if she tells the truth, yes, don't interrupt." I found Lydia at her hotel suite just past 10. She opened the door herself, robe belted, hair pulled back, eyes tired. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "That's a popular opinion." She stepped aside, and I entered. There was a teacup on the windowsill, a radio murmuring Strauss. "I came to ask about the briefcase." She didn't speak. "It was claimed 2 days ago by a woman who signed your name." Silence. "You didn't sign it." "No, you didn't send her either." Still silence. "You knew it existed, though." She turned from the window. "Yes. Who packed it?" "Thomas, 6 months ago." "Why didn't you tell us?" "Because I didn't know if they knew." "They do now." She sat on the armrest of the divan. "Was it you?" she asked. "No, but I saw the ledger. The name they used. Ruth Conrad. Her lips parted slightly, then she closed them again. Then they're serious. They were serious before. She looked up at me. I didn't know what was in it. He wouldn't say, just that it was dangerous, and if something ever happened to him, I was to pretend it didn't exist until someone else asked. And they did? No, not directly. But I felt the noose tighten, so I ran to you. I nodded. Then it's time to stop running. She gave a slow breath. Tell Wolfe, she said. I'm ready to talk. Wolfe had not left his chair in 3 hours. The office was cloaked in lamplight, curtains drawn, and the air thick with the scent of oolong and patience. I sat across from him, legs stretched, arms folded. The scorched fragment lay beneath his magnifier, anchored by a brass paperweight shaped like an elephant. I've decoded the column structure, he said without looking up. Good, because the numbers were starting to hum in my brain. He lifted his gaze. Humming is preferable to guessing. I leaned forward. So, what are we looking at? He turned the paper, aligning the bottom edge with a ruler. It's a command chain, vertical logic, sequential cipher, Prague formatting, rotated 45 degrees, then re-scrambled using a pre-war naval code. That sounds exhausting. He gave me a look that didn't warrant a reply. Here, he tapped the lower half. This line, PC contract, terminate, on signature. That's plain English, disguised as a clause. It mimics legal phrasing to avoid suspicion. PC, Prague contract, possibly, or Project Cipher, or personal clearance. The ambiguity is deliberate, but the meaning's clear. Wolfe nodded. It's a death order. The moment someone signs something, perhaps a name, perhaps consent, the termination is authorized. I looked at the fragment again. The characters, once nonsense, now held teeth. Harrow knew? Yes. You're sure? This isn't random. It was encoded with precision. He didn't stumble into it. He carried it. I sat back. So someone signs, someone dies, correct? And someone else is holding the pen. Wolfe closed his eyes briefly. The contract wasn't theoretical. It was executed. Harrow, I believe so. His death was the result, not of betrayal, but fulfillment. That means he was the signer? Wolfe's eyes opened again. Or the subject. It depends on which end of the pen you're holding. He rose, rare, deliberate, and moved to the bookshelf. He withdrew a red volume and paged through it. In the Prague field network, signature didn't always mean ink. Then what did it mean? He turned a page, then another, a confirmation, voice, code phrase, even a physical token, signing. Could be a gesture, a location reached, a suitcase opened. He returned to his chair, which means Harrow may have triggered his own death, by accident or design. And whoever ordered it, I asked, remains unnamed, but not unreachable. I studied Wolfe. So, we have a kill clause. Executed, hidden in plain sight. Wolfe leaned forward, and now exposed. He touched the fragment lightly. And, once exposed, it becomes a liability. To who? To everyone who ever touched it. I stood and walked slowly to the window, parting the curtain with 2 fingers. Outside, the street lamps had come on. Manhattan was a pool of mist and motion. They'll want it back, I said. No, Wolfe corrected. They'll want it gone. I turned. Even the fragment? Especially the fragment. He tapped the scorched edge with a pen cap. It proves the contract existed. It names nothing directly, but the phrasing alone links it to prior cipher patterns. And that's enough to open doors. Wolfe's face darkened. It's enough to close them, permanently. I crossed back to the desk. So Harrow's dead because someone signed something, maybe him, maybe not. And this note was part of the delivery. Or the record, Wolfe said. But yes, I looked at the fragment again. You said it uses Prague formatting. Rotated, recoded. Why hide something that's already classified? To protect it from allies, Wolfe said. Not enemies. That landed like a shot. So it wasn't about hiding it from Soviets. No, it was about keeping it quiet inside the room. Wolfe nodded. Only a small group would know how to read this. Even fewer would dare to question its use. And now we've read it, which makes us inconvenient. The room grew quiet. I looked toward the hallway. You think Lydia knows. She suspects. But I doubt she's seen this. She's ready to talk. Then let her. But no names, no locations. Keep her safe. If they knew she was here, he didn't finish the sentence. I nodded. He leaned back, pressing his fingertips together. You'll see her tomorrow. Ask about the signature, what it meant, whether Harrow had any pattern. Something he did when he felt trapped. A place. A habit. You think there's more. I'm certain of it. I walked toward the office door. And Wolfe? Yes? If someone knocks tonight who doesn't knock twice, don't open. I won't, he said. But Fritz might offer them soup. I smiled faintly, then left. Behind me, the fragment lay under glass, its blackened edge curling like the edge of a page, half burned, half written. Whatever it was meant to silence. It had just begun to speak. At 7:38 that evening, the doorbell rang. Not twice, not hesitantly, but with a violence that shook the frame. Fritz glanced toward the hallway, wiped his hands on a cloth, and said nothing. I rose. I'll get it. When? I opened the door. Inspector Kramer filled the threshold like a thunderhead in a wool coat. You, he said, are going to sit down and shut up. He didn't wait for permission. He stormed in, straight through the hallway and into the office like it belonged to him, trailing damp fury and the kind of mood that said someone had died. Wolfe didn't rise. He sat behind his desk with a half glass of sherry, and he didn't so much as tilt his head. Inspector, he said mildly. Don't you dare, Kramer snapped. Don't you give me 1 ounce of your fat smugness tonight. I followed him in, shut the door behind me, and stayed standing. Kramer slammed a tan folder onto Wolfe's desk. Tilda Vance is dead. Wolfe didn't blink. Found in her apartment. 20 minutes ago. Strangled. Mouth stuffed with something red. Guess what it was? Wolfe's silence stretched. Kramer answered his own question. A wax seal. Same size, same damn color. Jammed in like a warning. He yanked out a photograph. Grainy, harsh flash. Vance's pale face frozen in shock. Lips cracked around a dull red disc. Wolfe studied it. Kramer jabbed a finger toward the blotter. Knew she came to see you. You knew she was involved. And instead of coming to me, you let her walk out the door and straight into a coffin. I did not let her walk, Wolfe said quietly. She left of her own will. She left because you didn't stop her. Kramer spat. Wolfe folded his arms. You were already aware of the seal's meaning. Not like this. No. Because you do not listen. Kramer's teeth ground together audibly. Don't play philosopher. You had information. You sat on it. I had fragments, Wolfe said, and I was waiting for the shape of the thing to reveal itself. Well, it just revealed itself on a dead woman's face. Wolfe looked at the photo again, then leaned forward. Describe the seal, he said. You think I didn't bring it? Kramer pulled a small envelope from his coat. Inside, padded with tissue, lay a wax seal, red, round, slightly cracked along one edge. Wolfe motioned. I took it and brought it to his magnifier. He studied it. A phoenix, he murmured. Over. Crossed swords. The same? I asked. Wolfe nodded. Identical. Kramer didn't sit. What does it mean? Wolfe laced his fingers. It means someone is continuing the Prague Protocol. Speak English. It means someone is killing. People marked by an old contract and sealing their silence. Kramer paced. You're telling me this isn't random? That Vance was part of it? She altered a letter, Wolfe said. She claimed it was minor. It wasn't. She believed she was following orders, but she was a witness, a courier. That made her expendable. Kramer's eyes narrowed. You have proof? I have logic, Wolfe said. And soon, I'll have names. You'd better. Because if I find out you've hidden anything, I'll have you in cuffs before Fritz can bring in dessert. Wolfe didn't flinch. Inspector, you may indulge your threats later. For now, tell me, was the window locked? What? In Miss Vance's apartment. Was the window locked from the inside? Kramer blinked. Yes. Why? Because the killer wanted time. They knew the body wouldn't be found until morning. The seal wasn't for the police. It was for me. Kramer stared. For you? Yes. Wolfe looked at me. Archie, bring the other seal. I retrieved it from the drawer, carefully wrapped, labelled and untouched since we'd found it. I handed it over. Kramer took both, held them side by side. Same press, he muttered. Same ridges. Same killer, Wolfe said. And the same warning, I added. Kramer sat, finally, as if the weight had finally caught up to his feet. Wolfe's voice dropped. You've been chasing bodies. I've been chasing the author. Kramer folded his arms, elbows wide, his face hard, but no longer molten. You're saying this wasn't personal? No, Wolfe said. It was deliberate. Vance wasn't killed in rage. She was silenced. Formally. I added, she wasn't the first. Harrow Poe. Same pattern. Kramer looked down at the photos again, then back at Wolfe. And you think more are coming? I think more are already gone. Quiet deaths, sealed apartments, no press. He chewed, the inside of his cheek. We found nothing else in the room. No prints, no forced entry. Just the seal, her body, and a plate of uneaten eggs. She let him in, Wolfe murmured. Kramer straightened. Him? Yes. How do you know it wasn't a woman? Because Miss Vance feared men more. She would not have let a woman into her apartment unarmed. Kramer let that settle, then grunted. So she knew him. Likely. Wint? No, Wolfe said. Wint's a soldier, not a cleaner. This man is quiet, efficient, a handler, possibly ex-field, possibly still active. A man who doesn't miss steps, but wants his work recognized by the right eyes. Yours, I said. Yes. Kramer stood again and walked to the fireplace. If I pull everyone who worked Prague, I'll be swamped in bureaucracy until next. Spring. Wolfe's tone sharpened. Don't. Pull the Prague archivists, the cryptographers, the men who stored orders, not those who gave them. Kramer turned. That narrow enough for you? It's where the trail begins. Kramer sighed. This was supposed to be routine. A translator with a messy will. Now I've got 3 bodies and a wax stamp that screams war crimes. It's not a war crime, Wolfe said. It's war's residue. Still active, still classified, still lethal. I added, and it doesn't care about timelines. Kramer paced again. So what do you want? Time, Wolfe said. And space. If you press too hard, they vanish. You mean the killers? No, the documents. Kramer narrowed. His eyes. There are more? There were always more, Wolfe said. He pointed to the seal. That's not a threat. It's a signal. One sent to me, because they believe I'm close. I said, you are. Wolfe didn't move. And that's why Miss Vance is dead. Kramer looked at him. For once, he didn't argue. Instead, he picked up both wax seals and sealed them back in the envelope. I'll keep one, he said. But I'll log both. Wolfe nodded. And Wolfe, Kramer added as he walked to the door. If I find out you've known more than this, I'll tell you, Wolfe interrupted. Kramer paused. When? When it's safe. The inspector didn't slam the door. He closed it. Quietly. I turned to Wolfe. You believe him? No. Then why promise? Because he needs to believe it. Long enough to do his part. I stepped to the sideboard and poured 2 fingers of rye. Wolfe stared at the photograph on the desk. The grainy face of Tilda Vance, mouth filled with silence. She never had a chance, he said. No, she thought she was helping. She was, I said. She helped us. He nodded once. Archie, he said. Yes. Call Saul. Have him trace all Prague-era seals with that impression. I want to know how many survived. And after that, then we find out, Wolfe said, who still carries one in their pocket. The phone rang at 12:47 a.m., sharp and shrill against the silence. I'd been half dozing in the office, chair with a book on Roman cryptography open across my chest. Wolfe had gone up an hour earlier. Fritz was long asleep. I picked up on the 3rd ring. Goodwin. Her voice came in low and broken. Archie, it's me. Lydia, I need your help, please. What's wrong? I'm downstairs, in the lobby. I can't be alone. I was already moving. I'll be right there. She was seated in the far corner of the lobby, half shadowed by a marble column, her coat buttoned up to the neck, gloves still on. The night clerk had seen me before and gave no trouble. She stood as I approached, but didn't smile. I didn't know where else to go, she whispered. You came to the right place. We sat in a side alcove of tufted armchairs and velvet drapes. The air smelled faintly of lemon polish and radiator heat. She looked thinner. The light caught the tired crease beneath her eyes. I need to tell you something, she said. I'm listening. It's about Thomas. Go on. She exhaled slowly, hands clasped tight. He wasn't just decoding ciphers, he was collecting them, memorizing, copying, filing. Not for records, not for work. I leaned in slightly. For what then? For leverage. She glanced at the hallway, then back at me. There was a group. Quiet, internal. Former OSS, some active, some not. They operated off book. Still do, I think. He called them the Ledger. Cabal. Ledger. They kept no names, just designations, contracts, signatures. But Thomas, he found ways to follow the lines. He said it was like chasing a shadow that left a footprint. And he followed it? Yes. To Prague. To Berlin, back here. He said the ledger was being used again, and that he had proof. Cipher contracts, activations, orders linked to people, still in office. And he planned to expose them? She shook her head. No, not exactly. He planned to use them. To blackmail? Yes, quietly. He thought if he held the right note, something undeniable, they'd back off, leave him alone. But they didn't. No, her voice cracked. I think he got too close. Or maybe he told the wrong person. After the second briefcase vanished, he stopped sleeping. He changed locks. He burned things. Did he tell you who they were? No names. But he said one had a scar behind his ear. Another never took off his gloves. He never gave me their titles. Just signs. Did he leave anything behind? She nodded. I think so, but not in the apartment. Somewhere else. Where? Her voice dropped lower. St. Anselm's. The church? He used to go there after meetings. Sit in the back. Said it was the only place the silence didn't feel false. I blinked. You think he left something there? I think he hid something. A paper. A page. I don't know what. Do you feel safe? No. Do you want protection? I don't want a badge. I want truth. Just once. From someone. I looked at her hands. White knuckles under. Soft leather. You have it from me. She nodded, then reached into her pocket. I kept this. She handed me a folded piece of paper. Thin, old, but intact. I unfolded it slowly. It was a cipher string. Handwritten. Neat. Intentional. From the briefcase? I asked. No. From the drawer he never opened while I was in the room. I folded it again. Slipped it into my coat. This helps. I hope so, she said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Because if it doesn't, I'm next. The lobby felt colder as we stood. Lydia drew her coat tighter, though no draft stirred. The night clerk watched us through half-lidded eyes, pretending not to listen. Will you walk me back upstairs? She asked. Of course. The elevator creaked. As we ascended, she said nothing, but her eyes scanned the corners, the mirrored panel, the space behind her. She wasn't nervous. She was hunted. On the 12th floor, I walked her to her door. She paused before unlocking it. I used to think fear was a feeling, she said. Now I think it's a decision, one they make for you. I won't let them make it permanent. She opened the door. The room was clean, untouched. A single reading lamp cast a warm glow over an armchair and a closed suitcase. She turned to face me. Will you tell Wolfe? Yes. Will he help me? He already is. She offered a faint nod. Thank you, Archie. I didn't move until she locked the door behind her. Back in the cab, I unfolded the cipher she'd handed me. Letters and numerals. Clean, deliberate, inked with a pen that didn't shake. At the top right corner was a stamp. Faint, nearly invisible. PC 77 SIG, Ref R3 back. At the brownstone, the hallway lamp was still lit. Wolfe was awake. I found him in the office with a cup of coffee and a look that meant he hadn't slept. You heard the call, I said. Yes. She told me everything. I handed him the cipher. He adjusted his glasses, then leaned toward the desk lamp. Aha. You recognize it? I recognized the structure. This was not written to be sent. It was written to be found. He pointed to the corner. PC 77. Signature reference. Revision 3. So it's a version? Yes. Each time they activated the clause, it updated. This may be the last. Lydia says Harrow planned to blackmail the group. She called them a rogue cabal, former intelligence, still pulling strings. He was a fool, Wolfe muttered. You don't wave a match over dry powder unless you're prepared to burn with it. He thought leverage would buy him space. It bought him a funeral. Wolfe took the cipher, placed it on a clean sheet, and began transcribing. There's a phrase here, he said. Middle column, encoded 3 layers deep. I waited. He decrypted in silence. When he looked up, his face had changed. Harder. Set. It reads, terminate upon closure of witness set. If seal broken, action repeats. I exhaled. So Vance wasn't the last. No, Wolfe said. She was the middle. And Lydia, if we don't stop them, she's the final act. I looked at the clock. 2:04 a.m. Wolfe pushed back in his chair. Get Saul. Now. I want eyes on every man who handled Prague operations and retired with a pension. And if they're not retired, then we start watching cemeteries. He tapped the cipher again. This isn't a document. It's a list with teeth. Every person who's seen it, copied it, held it, dies when someone decides it's time. And Lydia? She's holding the last line. And Harrow? He was the one who made them afraid enough to start killing again. The room was quiet. Then Wolfe said softly, "Now the question is, who's holding the seal?" The Corinthian Club wasn't the sort of place where you raised your voice or got in without a tie. It had dark paneling, carpet deep enough to drown a matchstick, and the kind of quiet usually reserved for vaults and funerals. Colonel Wint sat alone by the fireplace, a glass of scotch on the table, and a paper folded neatly at his side. His shoes were polished, his jaw clenched, and his eyes didn't waver as I walked up and sat across from him without asking. I told the desk not to disturb me. I leaned forward. They didn't. But I don't wait for permission. Wint didn't blink. "You're persistent, Mr. Goodwin. I suppose I shouldn't be surprised." "Let's save time," I said. "You were in Prague. You knew Harrow. You've been ducking every question that matters." He picked up the glass, took a small sip, and set it down with military precision. "If you're here to threaten me, don't bother. Not threatening. Pressuring. You understand pressure, Colonel." He stared into the fire. "Pressure is a tool. But if you apply it unevenly, it destroys the structure you're trying to shape." Harrow applied pressure, and he ended up in a box. That got him. A flicker. Barely a shift in his expression. "But enough. You were there at the end, weren't you?" I asked. Wint didn't answer. "He trusted you, told you what he was doing, maybe even showed you the list." He turned his head. His voice was lower now. "I warned him. I said there were boundaries that shouldn't be crossed." "You mean laws?" "No, I mean names." I let that hang. He continued, slower now. "After the war, there were defectors, quiet ones, not to the Soviets, not to Cuba, but to each other. They formed a net, untraceable, loosely connected through coded obligations, and some of those names stayed in Manhattan. Harrow found them. He tried. He thought if he compiled a list, he could control them, a ledger for ghosts." I said nothing. "He wasn't stupid," Wint went on. "He was brave, but bravery without caution is a kind of madness." I asked, "You saw the contract?" He gave a short nod. "One version. It was a map, not of places, but of people. If one name signed, another died. If a briefcase moved, a window shattered in Berlin. And you didn't stop him?" "I tried. He didn't listen." Wint leaned forward now, elbows on knees. "You don't understand, Mr. Goodwin. The names on that list weren't retired soldiers or aging diplomats. They were still active, still working, and they were protected by each other and by the contract. Yes, and that's why Vance is dead." Wint looked down at his glass. She altered something. Maybe she thought it was harmless. Maybe she thought it was a favor, but she became a variable, and variables are eliminated. I stared at him. "And Lydia?" His voice dropped. "She's not supposed to speak. If she does, she's next." Then, "Talk fast, Colonel, because if anything happens to her, I'll make it my business to rip that list out of every shadow it hides in." Wint looked up at me. Something in him had changed. "You don't get it," he said. "Some names aren't protected because they're powerful. They're powerful because they're protected. And yes, some names are worth killing for." I didn't move. Neither did he. The fire cracked behind us, soft and rhythmic, as if it too were listening. "Give me something," I said. "Anything I can use." Wint stared into the hearth. His jaw moved once, then stilled. "There was a code phrase," he said, "used to refer to the ledger in meetings. Never written. Spoken once, then dropped. What was it?" He looked at me. "Lux in tenebris. Latin. Yes. Light in darkness." He nodded. "It marked the list. Harrow used it. The Prague dispatchers used it. Anyone who mentioned it without clearance was flagged. And the briefcase? There were two. The first was a decoy, carried fragments, enough to frighten, not enough to indict. The second held the root structure, names, coded actions, cross-referenced with operations. Was Lydia involved? No, not directly. Harrow didn't trust her with the mechanics, but he trusted her with the why. And you? Wint hesitated. I burned my clearance too. Years ago. Walked away, but the names followed me. You don't scrub a shadow. It scrubs you. You're saying you're a target. He gave a faint smile. I'm saying the moment I talk to you like this, I become one. I stood, then keep talking. Let's make it count. But he shook his head. No, I've given you all I can. Say, and still wake up tomorrow. I leaned in. You're not giving me enough to stop anything. Vance is gone. Harrow's gone. Lydia's one page away from joining them. Wint looked up. Then don't let her turn the page. I stared at him. You'll testify? No. You'll give Wolfe the list? No. Then what will you do? He stood slowly. I'll tell you where it was kept. Maybe that helps. Maybe not. I waited. St. Anselm's. Under the nave. Loose stone. North aisle. Harrow. Used to sit third from the back, right side. He marked it once, then let time cover it. You're sure? I'm still alive, aren't I? He started to walk past me, then paused. And Mr. Goodwin? Yes? He didn't look at me. If you find the list, don't read it. Not out loud. I watched him go. He moved like a man with dignity, but without distance. One step from a grave he'd already dug. Back on the street, the cold had returned. I lit a cigarette with a match that didn't want to catch. And in my pocket was a Latin phrase that could bury cities. At precisely 8 o'clock, Fritz opened the front door without expression and ushered in the guests one by one. Inspector. Kramer arrived first, coat slung over his shoulder, jaw already tight. Then Colonel Wint, spine stiff as ever, hat in hand. Lydia came last, pale, composed, but clearly rattled. In the office, Wolfe hadn't moved. He sat beneath the glow of the brass lamp, yellow chair at full command. The red client chairs had been arranged with surgical intent, 3.5 arc before him, nothing between them but tension. Archie stood near the wall, notepad in hand. But I wasn't taking notes. Wolfe lifted his gaze. Thank you for coming. I trust you all understand the urgency. Kramer grunted. You didn't give us much choice. No, Wolfe replied. I didn't. He gestured. Please, sit. They did. Kramer with impatience, Wint with hesitation, Lydia without a word. Wolfe folded his hands. We've been chasing fragments, a cipher, a seal, a dead secretary. What seemed disconnected has now aligned. I called you here because tonight, that alignment concludes. Wint glanced toward Lydia, who didn't meet his eye. Wolfe continued. Miss Harrow, I'll begin with you. When you arrived here with a crimson briefcase, you claimed it belonged to your husband. You implied it held dangerous information. Do you still believe that? Lydia nodded once. I do. Then you were mistaken. She blinked. The case you brought was a replica, externally identical, internally empty. Its construction was newer than your husband's last deployment. It bore no aging, no residue of parchment or ink, and no abrasion on the handle. It had never been used. Kramer shifted. You're saying she faked it? No, I'm saying she was given it. Wint straightened slightly. By whom? Wolfe turned. By Miss Tilda Vance. A silence followed, heavy, sharp. Lydia's voice came soft. No, she didn't. She did, Wolfe said. Your husband gave her the real case, the one with the cipher contract, the ledger, the names. He entrusted her to safeguard it, and when he died, she panicked. Kramer narrowed his eyes. She came here. Yes, Wolfe said, and she lied, but not entirely. She told us enough to seem useful, not enough to be truthful. Then she tried to sell the real briefcase, through back channels, likely to foreign intelligence. She thought she was clever. She wasn't, I added. No, Wolfe said. She misjudged her value, and they killed her. Lydia's hands trembled in her lap. She said she was scared. She was, Wolfe replied. But fear does not absolve deception. Wint leaned forward. You're saying she gave Lydia a fake case to keep the real one out of sight? Yes. And Lydia, unaware, walked straight into the storm. Kramer scratched his cheek. How did you know it was fake? Dust, Wolfe said. And leather. He pointed toward the bookcase. Genuine war-era leather oxidizes differently. The briefcase showed no signs. Fritz confirmed it had a smell of beeswax polish and recent manufacture. Kramer nodded once reluctantly. So, what happened to the real one? Wolfe glanced at me. I stepped forward. We recovered it last night. St. Anselm's. Beneath a floor tile. Right under the third pew. North aisle. Wint's lead. Wint gave no reaction. Wolfe tapped the envelope on his desk. Inside were copies, cipher ledgers, sealed codes, and a document labeled PC-77, SIG, Ref R3. It outlines the termination protocol, all of it cross-referenced against a coded name set. And the list, Kramer asked. Wolfe didn't answer at once. It remains with me, sealed, because what it represents is no longer leverage. It's ammunition. One more death, and it will be released. Lydia closed her eyes. Wint cleared. His throat. What happens now? Now, Wolfe said. We stop pretending there are shadows in this room, because they're not in the hallway anymore. They're sitting in chairs, Kramer's voice came low. Are you accusing someone? Here? No, Wolfe said evenly. I'm informing everyone here that the moment Miss Vance offered to sell that briefcase, this became a war of containment. Not justice, not revenge. Containment. He glanced toward Lydia. And the moment you unknowingly carried the replica into my home, you became the last unwitting courier. Lydia looked up. Her voice trembled. But I didn't know. No, Wolfe cut in gently. You didn't. But that's precisely what made you useful. Wint stirred. Why kill Vance then? If she already surrendered the case. She didn't, Wolfe said. She hedged. She negotiated. And she failed. They couldn't risk her hesitating again. Kramer frowned. They, Wolfe turned to him. There is no single hand here, Inspector. It's a network of favors and debts. Some of them may no longer remember what they're protecting, only that it must be protected. Kramer shook his head. That doesn't help me book anyone. No, Wolfe agreed, but it may keep your men from dying in doorways. Wint finally broke his silence. You said the list names active defectors. Yes. Are they still operating? Wolfe looked at him, slow and unblinking. Some of them are in rooms like this. Others are in buildings with flags. 1 or 2 are buried, but their names still cause tremors. Wint stood. You don't understand what you're playing with, Wolfe. You think this is a puzzle. It's not. It's a covenant. A covenant sealed by murder, Wolfe replied. Forgive me if I decline to honor it, Lydia whispered. What do we do now? Wolfe's voice dropped. You stay alive. All of you. That's the first rule. The second, do not move alone. Do not speak to anyone who cannot be traced. If a phone rings, let it. If a car waits outside, don't approach. This is not over, Kramer muttered. You've made damn sure of that. No, Wolfe said. They have. I merely insisted on knowing why. He reached for the envelope on his desk and placed it in the drawer, locking it with a key. There are copies, sealed in 3 locations. If I'm removed, they emerge. Simultaneously, Kramer grunted. Paranoid much? Prepared, Wolfe said. There's a difference. Wint faced Wolfe. If they come for you, they won't, Wolfe said. They rely on fear, not force. I am not afraid. He glanced to me. Archie will see Miss Harrow home. You, Colonel, will return under escort. And you, Inspector, will do whatever it is you must do to avoid a federal gag order. Kramer stood slowly. You'll hear from me again. I expect nothing less. He turned to Lydia. I'll have someone stationed nearby. Quiet. You won't see them. That's the point. Thank you, she said softly. Wint offered her a brief nod. Be careful. Lydia looked to Wolfe. You believe it can be stopped? No, Wolfe said. But it can be exposed. An exposure is the first form of defense. They filed out one by one. Coats drawn tight. Faces unreadable. When the door closed, Wolfe exhaled. The fire crackled once in the silence. I stepped to the desk. Do you think they'll go quietly? No, he said. But I no longer require them to. He leaned back. We now hold the one thing they fear. Context. They've killed to keep a name list. But names mean nothing without the truth that connects them. And we have that truth. Wolfe looked to the drawer. We have enough of it. The brownstone felt sealed from the world. But for the first time in days, it did not feel cornered. And Wolfe, yellow chair creaking beneath him, had stopped listening. He had begun to hunt. The brownstone was quiet at noon. Wolfe had summoned Lydia for tea, which Fritz prepared with the grace of a surgeon and the indifference of a saint. The porcelain cups clinked softly. The clock ticked like a heartbeat. Lydia sat in the red chair, back straight, hands folded. She wore a black dress, simple and sharp. Wolfe hadn't spoken for 5 minutes. He let silence do the heavy lifting. At last, she said, You asked for me. Wolfe nodded. Yes. He reached to the side drawer and removed the envelope, the same one that had survived the church floor and Vance's betrayal. He placed it on the table between them, but did not open it. This, he said, contains the cipher you claimed belonged to your late husband. She gave a slow nod. I want to be very precise, Wolfe continued. You said he left it, that he feared for your safety, that you were merely the recipient of his burden. I was. No, Wolfe said. The denial landed soft, but final. Lydia's brow flickered. Mr. Wolfe, I've had that cipher reviewed, not merely decoded. Its metadata, fold lines, pressure strokes, annotation ink, points to one conclusion. It was not written by Thomas Harrow. She stilled. Furthermore, I have a record from the State Department showing that you were never legally married to him. Not in the United States, not abroad. You traveled under your maiden name until 1947, then adopted the Harrow name in documents, without a license or certificate. Kramer, who had entered minutes earlier and stood just behind the archway, stepped forward. His badge gleamed dully in the lamplight. Lydia's voice didn't tremble. I don't understand. You will, Wolfe said. Because I also have a photograph. Prague, March 1946. Taken in front of the consulate. It shows Harrow in uniform. And beside him, not a wife, a handler. Intelligence Division. Alias listed. Lydia Ashcroft. She rose. Wolfe didn't blink. You were never his widow. You were his control, his superior. You used my office and my trust to draw out the remnants of a failed cabal that you yourself once helped construct. You didn't want justice for Harrow. You wanted vengeance for the operation that collapsed around him. Lydia's breath caught, but only once. Do you have proof of this? I do. Kramer stepped beside her. Ma'am, he said, I'm placing you under federal detainment until these facts are reviewed. She didn't move. You won't make it stick, she said. You'll have your hearing, Kramer replied. In a room with locked windows. But Lydia wasn't listening. Her eyes had moved to Wolfe. You used me. No, Wolfe said. You used me. I merely declined to stay used. She stepped back. You don't understand what you've done. Wolfe raised a brow. I've removed a false premise. That's all. She turned, sudden and fast, moving toward the door. But Saul Panzer stepped into the hallway. No, he said quietly. Not that way. Lydia stopped. For the first time, she looked tired, not frightened, just finished. She allowed Kramer to take her arm. No struggle, no raised voice, only a final glance toward Wolfe. Something unreadable passed behind her eyes. Kramer said, You'll be taken to a secure holding site. You'll have counsel. But if any of this checks out, if Wolfe's right, then you're done. Lydia didn't speak. She walked past Archie and Saul with quiet grace, as if she were simply leaving. A concert early. No collapse, no confession. Just calm. The front door closed. Fritz re-entered with a napkin and retrieved the untouched tea. Wolfe hadn't sipped. Neither had she. I stepped to the center of the room. Well, I said, that makes her the first client to confess by silence. Wolfe didn't look at me. She never planned to kill anyone, he said. Not herself, not directly, but she intended to watch them fall, one by one, as long as it didn't stain her hands. You think she cared about Harrow? I think she cared about control, about legacy. Harrow was part of her work. He was her mission. When he broke ranks, she used his death as an opportunity. To do what? To burn the remains of what she once managed. Quietly, efficiently. And if I had turned over the list, she would have done it. By passing it back? No. He leaned forward, eyes sharp. By making sure those on it turned on each other. A name is only power if it can be whispered in the right ear. She had the names. She wanted the ears. I whistled, low. She played us all. No, Wolfe corrected. She tried. He finally reached for the teacup, lifted it, and sipped. She underestimated the cost of pretending to mourn. She nearly pulled it off. Wolfe shook his head. No, not nearly. I never believed her. Not entirely. A widow knows how a man died. She doesn't ask if it was quick. I nodded slowly. So now what? Wolfe set the cup down. Now we resume. The list remains. The danger remains. But so does clarity. He picked up the sealed folder from the drawer. She wanted revenge. We want resolution. That is the difference. Outside, a car engine turned over and disappeared into the street. Inside, Wolfe leaned back in his chair. One pretender removed. One game fully revealed. And the ledger? Still waiting. The office was warm with firelight, but Wolfe hadn't touched. His brandy. The fragments lay on the desk like dead petals. Scorched edges, brittle texture, but ink still alive beneath ruin. He tapped one with a gold pen. This, he said, is not a contract in any legal sense. It uses the language of authorization, but it's nothing more than a list. A kill list. I straightened from the armchair. You're sure? Yes. The room was still. Fritz had brought supper early, but none of it was touched. I began. Reconstruction with the largest fragment, Wolfe said. Once I realigned the section headers and rotated the Prague field code, the context revealed itself. There are no allocations, no budgets, no routing stamps, just initials, dates, and outcomes. He flipped a second slip with tweezers. Initiate PC-77 under referent clause R3. Confirm outcome. Nullification of operative upon signature. I whistled. Nullification. A euphemism, Wolfe said. As were all the others. Termination by seal. Silence by rotation. Withdrawal from scope. The language isn't accidental. It's bureaucratic camouflage for sanctioned assassination. And the names? They're coded, he said. But I've broken enough of the cipher to see pattern. Some correspond to known defections. Names redacted in Senate archives, but still echoing through embassy dispatches. I leaned in. So Harrow wasn't blackmailing anyone. He was exposing them. No, Wolfe corrected. He was tracing the consequences. This wasn't a warning. It was evidence. He tapped a final piece. One line says, Subject, BS, 1947. Termination approved under Seal 2. Authority, WAG, linked to HD, active New York. I asked, that's not legalese? No, Wolfe said. That's execution language. Seal 2 means it followed a secondary confirmation, likely via courier. Authority names the signer. The subject is the target. And active New York means the one who carried it out may still be here. I exhaled. How many are on it? Too many. He opened a folder and spread the reconstructed, or lines. 6 slips, each recovered from the chimney cache or Tilda Vance's envelope. Archie, he said, this wasn't about one defector. It wasn't even about punishment. It was logistics. Quiet, systemic, invisible. A closed loop of sanctioned removal. You think it's still active? Wolfe met my eyes. I think the murders we've seen, Harrow, Vance, weren't random. They were continuations. Clean up. Yes, I rubbed the back of my neck. So what do? We shift tactics, Wolfe said. We stop, treating this like a puzzle. It's a machine, and machines respond to heat, meaning we apply pressure in public, carefully, strategically. We release one name, just one, through a channel they can't intercept, and we watch. Won't that endanger people? Only if we're careless. But if we name someone already buried, he left the sentence there. The fire cracked once. Wolfe, I said, you think this list was never supposed to be found? No, he murmured. It was always meant to exist, but only in darkness. Harrow dragged it into the light. He leaned back. Now we hold the flame. I paced once across the rug, staring at the slips. So what now? We leak one name and see who sweats. Wolfe nodded, but not indiscriminately. The name must be dead, confirmed, buried at least 5 years, to avoid retaliation. Precisely. We're not starting a fire. We're striking a match in a dry room. If they're watching, and they are, they'll react. I looked down at one fragment. Faint ink, nearly gone. Seal authorized on WEK 72. You think this one? No. Wolfe shook his head. Too recent. Too ambiguous. But this one, he slid a second fragment across the desk. BAL 1953. Terminated under directive Cobalt Echo. Known alias Benjamin Alcroft. Alcroft, I echoed. Didn't he vanish in Venezuela? Officially, yes. Unofficially, his disappearance was noted only in 2 decrypted cables. Neither confirmed by consular record. He was presumed defected. This fragment implies he was eliminated. And that was our government. Wolfe's face was stone. Not the government, a faction. We must distinguish the two. The agency that used this list didn't operate under flag. It operated under mutual protection. Like Lydia. Yes, Lydia was a remnant, a loyalist to its architecture. I moved to the globe, spun it once, stopped it with my palm on South America. So you want me to plant this? Quietly, yes, through Saul. No formal outlet. A whisper, a curiosity posted, in a forgotten corner of a reputable archive. And when they move, we follow, Wolfe said. The list wasn't the threat. Exposure is. There was a beat of silence. I crossed to the window. Outside, the city breathed behind fogged glass. Then I asked, Wolfe, why Harrow? Wolfe didn't answer right away. He poured 2 fingers of brandy, swirled them, let the silence settle. He tried to stop it, he said finally. Not out of virtue, out of guilt. He was part of it once. Maybe not the author, but an usher. He led people to their ends. And then, he saw what it became. Wolfe sipped. Some men repent with prayer, others with paper. Harrow chose ledgers. I returned to the desk. Then let's finish what he started. Wolfe gave a single nod. Yes, let's. And just like that, the fragments on the desk burned, brittle, blackened, became pages. In a book no one had dared to write, until now. Fritz served duck à l'orange precisely at 7. The sauce gleamed in amber light, steam curling from the porcelain like a ribbon of citrus and rosemary. Wolfe took one measured bite, closed his eyes, and gave a slow, solemn nod. Adequate, he said. Coming from Wolfe, it was a benediction. Wasn't tasting much. The duck was perfect, but something about the day had dulled the edges of every bite. Afterward, we retired to the office. Wolfe settled into the yellow chair with a sigh, the sort that meant conclusion. I dropped onto the red one opposite him, the back of my neck still tense. He reached for the drawer, withdrew a cream folder marked only by a single letter. C, Cipher, he said. That's what you're filing it under? Where else would it belong? I exhaled. Maybe under D for damage, or H for Harrow. Wolfe's gaze lifted. You're troubled. That obvious? You've spoken only twice since the roast potatoes. I stared at the far bookcase. Wolfe, did anyone win? He didn't reply right away. You exposed the list. You neutralized Lydia. You kept your promise to the inspector. But Harrow's dead. Vance is dead. God knows how many others were erased. And we're still sitting here, trying to decide which pieces we're allowed to remember. Wolfe studied me. Memory is never complete, Archie. It is always a selection. Yeah, and what we left out could fill a cemetery. The fire popped once, a single crack like a punctuation mark. I stood and poured myself a drink. Neat. No ceremony. I didn't sit back down. Maybe that's what gets me, I said. We peeled back the curtain, and all we found was paperwork that killed people. That paperwork, Wolfe said softly, was designed to appear innocuous. That is its genius. And its crime. I turned. Then why not expose it all? Why not give the list to the press? Dump it on the mayor's desk? Scream it from the rooftops? Wolfe's expression didn't change. Because truth, Mr. Goodwin, kills more effectively when whispered. I sipped the rye. I'm not sure if that's wisdom or surrender. It is neither, Wolfe said. It is restraint. I looked down at the folder again. See, so tidy, so final. Wolfe leaned back, fingertips pressed together, his eyes half-lidded. With thought, would you have preferred a list of martyrs? He asked. No, I said. I'd have preferred fewer ghosts. That is not a choice we're often given. The room fell quiet again. Not heavy, just thick. The kind of quiet that wraps itself around a sentence left unfinished. I moved toward the windows, cracked them an inch. The air outside was cool, damp with autumn. Somewhere, a horn echoed off brownstone and brick. Manhattan, alive and indifferent. Behind me, Wolfe cleared his throat. The list, he said, was never meant to be understood, only obeyed. And you? I asked. Did you understand it? I understood enough to disobey. I turned. You think that matters? It matters to me, he said, which in the end is the only measure I trust. I sat down again. Slowly, the red leather creaked. Will you keep it? I asked. The full translation? Yes. Forever? No. He tapped the drawer. One day it will go where such things belong, but not yet. And the rest? Wolfe gave a rare, weary smile. Filed, not forgotten. The fire had dwindled to coals. Fritz would be in soon to bank it for the night. Outside, the streetlights flickered into life. I rose again, stretched, then paused at the door. Wolfe? I said. Yes? There were good people on that list, weren't there? His eyes met mine. There were people, he replied. And some of them tried to be good. I nodded. That was as much as he'd ever give. As I turned the knob, he added one final thought. Truth kills softly, Archie, but it kills all the same. I stepped into the hall, and behind me, the yellow chair didn't creak again.